Hello guys, this is another YouTube video from me. I've seen a lot of talk and a lot of conversation about starters and starts and support and what route you want to go down and and I thought I'd make like a little graphic here and explain my thought process when it comes to starts and explain some of the breakdowns that it can be. On the screen here we've got physicals and magicals. I think every single item that's on here, it might be a little bit blurry, but I'm not going to fix it because I can't be asked. These are all the optional starts, I think, for support. Minus these three here, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but I think these are the main starts. Let's go over physicals, for example. So Sovereignty is very good against most junglers that are physical. It's very good against hunters. It's very good against warriors and solo. Typically in Smite, the split is 3 physical and 2 magical. So Sov's always quite strong. The issue with Sov is that if you go Sov and then you go a magical defense item, you usually miss out on a lot of good passives and you usually miss out on that Thebes, which is really strong item for support. And then if you do go Sov into Thebes, then you miss out on the instant magical, so you've got instant magical defense. So you have no magical defense from, let's say, minute 0 to minute 13, right? Let's just say that. Which is pretty dangerous versus a lot of gods right now, especially Tiamat, Raijin, Persephone, Morgan, There's a lot of good mages that abuse physicals. Well, Morrigan less so, but a lot of the mages do. So Sov is weak in that respect, but good against physicals. Very, very good against 4 physical boys. If you are playing 4 physical, I swear you should pick this item up every single game. And then make sure you go Thieves afterwards. This is the most important thing. Wingblade is not good into the traditional 3 physical, 2 magical, but it can be good in certain things. So, for example, against a Fafnir, which his main CC is a slow, it means he can't really CC chain you. Against Raijin, a lot of slows, good against him. Against Tiamat, a lot of slows, good against her. There are a lot of characters where Wingblade is very well in, and it gives you the movement speed, which lets you play on the map quite aggressively. Gives you a lot of health too. Not great versus the Hunter and the Jungler, but very good if you're playing around mid. So just think about that kind of character kind of out there. Thebes is the best start for the 99% of the situations, in my opinion. Unless they're 4 physical or they're 4 magical, Thebes is where you want to go, boys. It's just the safest start. Farm, get your stacks online. You'll be strong mid game. Shoguns. So Shoguns and Harwood I'm going to group together here for physicals. So Shoguns have just got a buff recently in mid-season patch where it's now 30% attack speed, which is really good. It gives health, it gives mana, it gives cooldown, it gives MP5. It's a really good item. It's quite cheap. It feels nice to build. Problem with Shoguns, again, like Wingblade, if you're not against the mid all the time and you're fighting against the warriors and the assassins and the hunters, you're going to be quite squishy. And Shoguns, again, when you rush a singular defense item like a Sov or a Shoguns with only one like defense type, physical or magical, when you go Thebes second, it just feels very slow. So if you go Shoguns into a Thebes, you have no physical prot for 13 minutes into the game, which again means you can get one shot by physicals. So it's more of a better second item. Similar with Sovereign Wingblade, in my opinion. You want to go Thebes into these and into these. Sledge is a weird one. So Sledge is something that's been theorized by a lot of other supports. Inbound, PBM, Aurora, Jake, Rongi. I've seen a lot of supports and a lot of streams where you see a physical support like a Fenrir or a Hercules or a Saket, and people want to build Sledge. So Sledge gives a lot of power, gives 40 power, gives CCR, which is really important in support. And that was what made Tank Boots really good, or part of Tank Boots. It gives you health, and it gives you a bit of prots. Now, when I say a bit of prots, if you're in a 1v1, you're going to get 8 prots. If you're in a 1v2, you get 16 prots. And if you're in against 3 people, you get 24 prots. 24 prots is about the same as Tank Boots gave you. Tank Boots might have given 18 or 20, around that. I think it was 18. So pretty similar to Tank Boots. The only issue is that the tier 2 is 1,300, which is a little bit on the expensive side. It feels a little bit worse to back for the tier 2 items. And the other issue with it is that even if you're getting all 3 stacks, 24 of each prot is not that much. Now, it's 1,000 more gold, more expensive than Tank Boots. It gives slightly more prots. It gives 30 more power. It gives a bit more CCR, and that's basically what you're getting for your buck. I would just say it's a very slow item. If you are going to build Sledge, you have to win the early game. If you don't win the early game, you will be useless until you get Thebes fully stacked. And at that point, 40 power on sports becomes a little bit redundant because you haven't got penetration. Penetration is usually the best way to get damage on sports. On physicals, you don't always need it because like Fenrir and Herc hit pretty hard with their base damage. I mean, Fenrir Brutalize hits for like 600 on a squishy late game, even without any scaling. And Herc obviously has passive power in his passive. I'm not a big fan of it, but you can build it if you want to, and if you're very good at playing the early game. And talked about Heartward, similar with Shoguns, same power spikes. Heartward, this is more to enable your team, this is more to protect your team, but they are very similar in the way they played. So a lot of items say similar here for magicals. The only exceptions being Binding and Lotus Crown. So Binding is like the Sledge. It's similar to Sledge in a way that it gives you a advantage the instant you build the item. It's very cheap though. It's 1,700 gold, which means that you get it on 1,100, which is about the same as the Thieves back. So you start with the Benevolence 600, Stunner Binding 600, and you can very quickly get your Binding online after the third or fourth wave, and then you have a big power spike until they get their Steeps fully stacked, which you'll be stronger. It also gives mana as well, which is really nice. So you get 10 MP5 from Benevolence, 10 from Binding. You can pretty much spam your abilities whenever you want in support, which feels pretty good. Again, the only issue with Binding is that Binding just fall off generally. Even though Binding has some sort of bug where the Binding passive applies first when doing calculations on penetration, it's still overall is still a kind of a meh item once you get past 10 minutes. And what is the point of building Binding when you can just build a Thebes? Is the question you have to ask yourself. I like it on gods like Anubis and like Baron support, but they're very niche picks and generally you won't see a lot of them. And even on gods like Cerberus, who apply a constant RCC, will Cerb 2 shreds every single prot in the game anyway, so Binding is overcap at that point, especially in the early game. So Binding's fine, but you have to really push the early game similar with Sledge. Second of all is Lotus. Lotus is like a magical version of Sov. You can still build Sov and magicals, don't forget that. But Lotus gives you a unique version of Sov where it gives you MP5 and it gives you magical prot as well. It's like a better version of Sov. You'll get poked more, but you have infinite mana to spam abilities with, which is really good for healing gods. So gods like Yemoja, gods like Terra. And Lotus Crown passive is probably a top 5 passive in the game, I think. Minus a few like 3k items. The fact that you can give all your allies 20 and 20 of each prots, and yourself is pretty insane. If you part to 5 people, that is a lot of prots, boys. It's 200 prots, right? If I'm not mistaken. It's 200 prots, yeah. It's crazy to think about. And it's very cheap as well. So the tier 2 costs 1,200, and the tier 3 costs 1,050 maybe. No, I'm trolling. 250. It costs. It's very cheap. It's very cheap. Only 850. 850 is what it costs. There you go, 850. It's a very cheap item, and it's very good. And I don't mind building it. I'd rather go Thebes than a Lotus because Lotus only gives 20 magical proc when you proc it, so you still can get blown up by magicals. But the passive is better, and it lasts. It scales through the late game better as well. So Lotus Crown definitely an essential item on characters like Yemoja, Terra, Sylvanas, gods like that apply heals to AoE. That's the main items covered. The next thing I want to talk about are these 3 underrated items that people don't really think about buying, but they could be out there and they could be optional on some characters. Let's talk about Mail of Renewal first. So Mail of Renewal is an item that has been underbought for a while. It got a really big rework at the start of this year. It got nerfed quite a lot. It wasn't very good. The prots on the item are conditional and they have a cooldown. So this item gives like base like 20 of each prots and it can go up to like 45. But the issue is that 45 is only achievable once every 60 seconds. So like if you get gone on and your passives disappear and the item goes in cooldown, you can't have more than 20 prots from the item for another minute. Just crazy to think about. So you have to really play well with the passive. And even though the passive is insane, the healing passive is insane. If 15% of your health to every ally is nuts. But the problem with the item that I said before, it's just that those passive prots are really a big issue. Mail of Renewal can be good though, and it gives both prots. Doesn't give any CDR, but it gives health, gives HP5 as well. I think this is actually a better version of Sledge if people are going to play physical sports, but it's up to them. Cactus Shield. This is another one that's like a more expensive version. It's the most expensive version on the list of all these items here. It costs like 2,550, I think. Maybe 2,450. Sledge has a really good tier 2, which is 1,150 gold. Gives really good power, 35 power. Gives good of each prots. It gives like 30 or 35 of each prots. It gives health. It gives bonus healing, 20% flat bonus healing, which for a hunter, or for your healing god like a Horus or a Guan Yu, or if you've got like a healer in your team like a Hel or a Ra, it can be really, really good. And it's not just early game, it's not just late game that it's good. It's good early game too. And it gives both pots, so no. It's like basically a worse thieves if you think about it. But the healing is you're basically trading off the healing passive for less prots on the thieves and the removing the protection aura you get from the thieves as well. But I think Cactus Shield, or whatever it's called, I just call it Cactus Shield, is definitely a decent option that people haven't really played around with too much. And finally, it's Pythags. Pythags is probably the most troll one. The only reason why Pythags could be good is because it gives health, so there is effective, defense there. Gives a lot of power, gives penetration, which you don't really care about, but it's a nice little stat. And it gives all your carries lifesteal and power. If you're fighting as 3 or 4 every single time you're fighting with Pythags, it's one of the most stat efficient items in the game in terms of just pure stats regardless of the passive. So it gives 70 power to the. Let's say you build this on a magical, gives you 40 power, and then each magical after that gets 30 power and 12% lifesteal. Okay, if you're giving your mid laner 30 power, your hunter 20 power, and your jungler 20 power, that's a lot of damage. And including the lifesteal as well, which can definitely stack up like 10%, 12% lifesteal is about as much as Cowl gives, about as much as Magus gives. These are pretty good stats. The only issue is it's not very defense, so it's not defense orientated. That's the one. So I would say Pythags is a better 5th, 6th item. You could maybe go a 2nd, but usually you want to go like for Pridwin or for one of these items up here that I've mentioned. These are core support items. But Pythags could be, in my opinion, maybe an underrated item on some characters. For example, like I said before, the Anubis or the Baron, or an Aphrodite, or a let me think of one more god before I go. A Hell could be okay, but I mean, there's not really play Hell support. Any physicals? Physicals can't build Pythags. That's my brain pretty much done with, boys. So I'm gonna end the video there, but I just thought I'd give it a bit of a breakdown about what you should be building and when you should be building it and all that shit. So just try and recognize what you're against. Try and count how many physicals and magicals there are on the enemy team. Try and look if you've got a heal or not. Try and look whether you want to protect your team more with the Heart Ward or buff them more and make them fight more with the Shoguns, and all that stuff. Anyway, guys, that was the video over. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've learned a little bit about starters if you didn't know before. But that's me done. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.